Noah Walker is one of only a handful of working architects that has captivated me over the last decade. And I can yet again thank social media for effectively making this episode happen. Noah and his firm, Walker Workshop, popped up on my Instagram feed several years ago, and I've been a fan ever since. His ability to combine warmth with minimalism is really what draws me to his work. And in times when trends tend to become status quo, Noah's designs truly exemplify the intersection of dream and reality. Prior to recording, Noah and I had never met, and I can't thank him enough for taking the time to chat with me. He wasn't feeling well the morning we were supposed to record, yet he instead opted for that afternoon, neither of which I anticipated. So, much respect to Noah on this one for what was really an enjoyable meetup and conversation. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard H Podcast. Really nice to meet you, man.
Thank you, Wesley.
Well,
nice to meet you too.
Thank you for being on the podcast, especially on a day where you weren't feeling so hot.
Yeah, no, feeling better now.
But that's all good. Well, first and foremost, I usually start with kind of like how you grew up, where you grew up, that kind of thing. Are you from this area?
Actually born out in Santa Barbara, but I spent most of my life on the East Coast. Sure. Actually went to high school, college, grad school, all in the East Coast. So starting in Philadelphia and then working my way up to Harvard for grad school.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then worked in New York for a while, like
awesome.
A lot of people do. You know.
Yeah, sure.
For 4 or 5 years, and then came out here about 12 years ago.
What was childhood like? Were you drawing, doodling, that kind of thing, building with Legos, I'm assuming?
That's a good question. You know, I was doing art. You know, I was definitely taking art classes. You know, some Legos, like all the kids are into Legos. You know, but probably space Legos.
Sure.
You know, but this was before the Legos got crazy too. I mean,
yeah,
we're probably similar age, and then Legos were just pretty basic back then.
Yeah, yeah, just the blocks.
You had to be a little bit more inventive.
Yeah.
But. Just drawing. I was always, sometimes I was even drawing cities, and stuff like that, like maps and stuff like that. So I was definitely interested in, urban environments and stuff like that when I was a kid. And then didn't really catch on to architecture until college. It wasn't what I was planning on doing in college, but then I took just a great architectural history class.
Where did you go to undergrad?
Haverford College in
where's that?
Philadelphia.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and had a great teacher. Was really into the subject matter, and I was like, why don't I expand on this and see what other courses there are? So I got deeper into it. I ended up graduating with like a pre-architecture degree from Haverford, and knowing that I would work a few years and then go on to grad school, because the way architecture is structured, you need a professional degree. So either you go for like a 5-year bachelor, which I didn't do, or you go for a master's degree later. So that's the route I took.
And you did that at Harvard?
Yeah.
How did Boston treat you?
Cold. Cold. Yeah. I mean, it's a cool place. Obviously, there's a lot of brilliant people there, and it's a cool place to study. Summers can be nice, but it's great.
It's a good drinking city. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Really big into sports? Are you into sports at all?
Yeah. It was great to, I'm still a Red Sox fan because of it.
Nice.
I think was I up there? It was the first time they won. I was up there. It was right after I was just wrapping up school, I think. And
I'm dating myself here, but I idolized Wade Boggs growing up.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Nice.
I was a third baseman growing up. So.
Oh, you were? You played baseball?
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. Nice. But that's cool.
Yeah.
So do you ever get back up to that part of the country?
I haven't been back to Boston in probably five years or so.
Sure.
Yeah, but I don't get back up there too much. I go to New York.
Yep.
Pretty frequently, but not to Boston. And
I'll be in New York in 3 weeks.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, New York is, I think, a really cool place. I like visiting New York more than I like living in New York. It's a
long weekend.
Yeah, exactly. 4-day weekend is a long. It's a grind if you live there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, so, with all the elements and everything. Yeah. Great for architecture, though.
It is. There's some really cool buildings popping up in New York right now. It seems like it's a pretty lively scene. Yeah. Yeah,
especially on that west side. Everything growing up, like was that like Hell's Kitchen, kind of maybe a little south of that? Yeah, Hudson Yards.
Yeah, I checked out Hudson Yards a couple weeks ago.
Oh, how was it?
It was interesting. I mean, there's that area is getting a lot of criticism, and probably justifiably because of its sort of crass commercialism.
Got it.
And it's basically just a big shopping mall with a flashy sculpture in front of it. But the sculpture's cool. There's be a lot of selfies taken in front of it.
Well,
so
that's kind of
that's
the way
the
world
is now.
Exactly.
Social media.
Got it. So what was family life like? What'd your parents do? Did you come from an architect's family?
No, I'm the only one in the whole family. Most of people in my family are ministers. Yeah, my dad was a minister. My mom's a minister. I have a half sister that's a minister.
Wow, that's awesome.
So that, in fact, that led to a lot of travel when I was a kid. My dad would go from, he probably popped between cities every couple of years. So I lived in a bunch of places up until high school. Oh, wow. Yeah, this was kind of an interesting way to see some different cities. I lived in Colorado for a while. Lived in Miami, Virginia, and then Philadelphia.
Wow, is that normal?
No, it's just sort of his profession. I think that he traveled to different churches as a way of, I guess he was reorganizing them, and then he'd move on to the next one. So, yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because, that spans some distance,
Oh,
like
yeah.
Colorado, Miami,
yeah.
Like it's not just within the state kind of thing.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, but Colorado was cool. I learned to ski out there when I was younger, so I still try to ski as much as I can. It's hard to ski when you're running a business and everything. But
the hills in North Carolina are pretty small.
I've skied at Boone.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Sugar Beach Mountain?
Probably beach too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the first time I ever went to like a big hill was in Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado's great.
Yeah,
great.
it's awesome.
Yeah,
beautiful out there.
Yeah,
that's great. So after Harvard, what were some of like your first gigs?
Down in New York. So I went to New York. I worked for a little bit for the architecture department chair at Harvard when I was there. She's a woman named Toshiko Mori, who still has a really great, thriving practice in New York. I worked for her for a little bit, and then a gentleman named Francois D. Menil, who's a sort of the family claim to fame is the Menil museums in Houston. So there's a lot of really beautiful. He has a lot of really beautiful modern residential work. It was great to work under him for probably a little over a year because I was the only person that worked with him. So I had just one-on-one tutelage for a little bit, and obviously a really great obsessive attention to detail from him. And then I went off and worked for a couple more years for a place called Peter Gluck and Partners, which is in New York too, and they do design build, and that was something I was interested in starting to sort of wrap my mind around, is the idea that the architect can also produce the work as a contractor. Right. And that's super cool, because then you get sort of a hands-on ability to control the work from the eyes of an architect, which has been really rewarding to do that way.
Now, for those that don't know, like what is the distinction, right, of just between, like, even from a business perspective?
Typically, the architect is just there to execute a design, essentially. So they'll do a set of documents, construction documents that are basically like a recipe for how to cook the soup, essentially. But then they give that recipe off to a chef, essentially would be the contractor that would make the soup, essentially. And then you say, well, is the soup, did you make it right? Does it taste good? Yeah, okay, great. But in design build, then we're basically in control of the whole production, from the design all the way through to the physical act of making the building, which is cool, because I think that architects have a lot more actually, interest in producing high quality work, great design, whereas a contractor, their mentality is typically to produce the work and to make money on it.
Right.
So
margin.
Yeah, exactly. It's a distinction there, and sometimes those two are in opposition. So,
right. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think more architects now are becoming design builders, probably for that reason, right? Or do you feel like I think it's growing. I don't think it's growing super fast. I actually think it's really difficult. I think it's probably a challenge for a lot of architects to do, because the infrastructure required for running a construction company is quite different than architecture, actually. And so it sort of means you have to sort of expand your footprint in ways that are challenging. I'd say that the amount of time that you put into a construction project is maybe 3 or 4 times the amount that you put into the design. So it really forces you to go really deep into sort of man hours and working methods to sort of pull it off. And so when I was starting out my own business, we were, just a couple of people. And so we would do essentially almost like one house or 1.5 houses at a time. It hasn't scaled the same way, when we're in an office now that
I think we're probably producing 10 houses or something like that a year. We're not building all of them anymore because we just
capacity.
Capacity. A construction company that does 10 houses a year is a big construction company, and I think that our general ethos and idea is to stay at an architecture firm first, and focus on the design aspects of it first. So we do. I think right now we have two homes under construction. That's probably a good pace for us. So we'll do 1 or 2 homes a year that are sort of more of a special bespoke sort of relationship, and then the rest of the homes we do the traditional architect, do the drawings, give the drawings
concepts
to
and
the GC, and then go out and visit the site, and make sure it's being executed right.
So what is the structure of your company currently? How many employees do you have?
We're about I'd say 18 or 20.
Okay.
Mostly architects. I think there's a dozen trained architects in the office, and then the rest are support staff. We've got 3 people that are specialized in construction, construction managers, and then 1 or 2, depending upon how busy we are, true carpenters. Yeah. So we do a lot of the pickup work and finished carpentry work ourselves on the projects.
Oh, that's
which
great.
is great because there's a little bit more control over some of the weird stuff that we do. So sometimes there's stuff that we might get an assignment or have a piece of the design that nobody wants to touch, for example, and then it's like, well, somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, sure.
It's going to fall on us to do that.
Yeah.
As well.
So when was the company founded?
2010.
Okay, so you're 9 years old.
10 years,
Oh, that's great, man. Congrats.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So do you do much commercial work then?
We haven't done any.
None.
No,
Zero.
No. Would love to.
I was going to say, because I've noticed it's mostly homes.
It's all residential so far. I would love to do a commercial project, whether it's a store or a restaurant, bar. Bar would be great because then anytime you go in there,
right?
Here's a drink.
Yeah, I was going to say you got to be everlasting tab.
Yeah.
Do you think that the approach would be any different, obviously, for like a commercial space versus residential?
I think they'd be surprisingly similar. I mean, I think our work is really tends to be really pared down and simple. We try to get to the sort of the essence of what the space requires, not to make it too fussy and complicated typically. So I think that would be the same whether it was a restaurant or a house. I mean, obviously some of the stuff that you do in a commercial space would be different, but we would definitely try to keep the aesthetic similar and sort of the notions of what we're trying to do similar.
So how would you describe your style? You personally?
It's sort of a warm, organic minimalism.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely modern, but unlike a lot of modern architecture that can come off as a little bit cold and off-putting, we try to keep it very accessible. We try to keep it simple. I think a lot of the nicer moments in our projects have to do with like the way light travels through spaces and trying to be sort of elegant proportions and stuff like that.
I really enjoyed just through the photos and such your use of woods and things like that. Like, I think a lot of modern architecture is just concrete, glass, and steel.
Right.
And then a lot of times you can introduce woods. I think the wood is really what gives you that warmth.
Yeah.
Is there any particular wood that's your favorite, or like any materials per se?
It's a weird thing. Like we do use cedar. Cedar's tough to put on the outside just because it takes a lot of maintenance, especially if you're down at the coast or somewhere like that. You have to maintain your cedar probably twice a year with new finish coats on it and stuff like that. I like Ipe. Ipe's a little bit harder to work. But it's dense and non-combustible. You could just let it go gray if you wanted to. So it's essentially a no-maintenance material. We've done a couple projects in this stuff called shosugiban, which is super cool. That's
Japanese.
Yeah. That's a traditional Japanese way of basically they burn the wood in advance of putting it on their houses, and that sort of sucks all the moisture out of it, makes it very inert. So you end up with this sort of charred-looking outer skin on it that they don't have to maintain at all. When that goes on, it looks pretty cool. I mean, it looks dark,
and that sort of texture mitigates expansion and things like that too.
Yeah, it's very stable. I mean, we've put some shosugiban on some projects very close to the beach, and the maintenance requirements for that are way down. 25% of what it would be for cedar or something like that.
Yeah, that's great.
It works great at the beach.
Well, I was just about to ask you about inspirations. Is Japan?
Japan's awesome.
Huge.
Yeah, Japan's great. Been there a couple times. But both times I went, got a lot of inspiration from people like Tadao Ando, who's famous Japanese architect known for his concrete work, which is impeccable. There's Kengo Kuma, who's doing really beautiful. He does a lot of beautiful woodwork. I think he might be the architect for Starbucks over there too.
Is that right?
He just finished like an amazing Starbucks store
in Tokyo.
Yeah, in Tokyo.
Okay.
And I think he's also doing the Olympic Stadium there too. So he's doing big and small projects. But he's definitely an inspiration too.
Oh, that's very cool. What were some of the early days inspirations? Like any architects, while you were at Harvard or otherwise?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Ando was definitely on the scene then. There's Peter Zumthor, who's actually he's a great one to admire and follow too. His work is actually really diverse, I feel like, but incredibly well, like impeccably detailed and beautiful. Mm-hmm. He's doing the LACMA museum. The new one here, I guess, has already been approved by the county, so we'll see how that one turns out. And I think that's probably his first building.
Is that an expansion on the current LACMA, or is that different?
It's an expansion. I think they're going to tear down a section of it and then build a new museum.
That's awesome. So, I had no idea. That's great. While working for those other people, like in New York and such, were you working on your own personal projects too that you would commission, or no? So you were just learning. Yeah, sure. Just sort of,
busy. Architects typically might work a 50 or 60-hour work week. There's not a lot of time to sort of cultivate your own personal stuff. And I also, New York's an interesting market too. It's hard for young architects, I feel like, to start out because it's so, I guess, institutionally entrenched, New York. I mean, I think if you're a young architect, you're lucky to get to remodel somebody's kitchen or something like that.
Right,
There's not a whole lot of exterior walls or envelopes that you're going to get to play with as an independent architect in New York until you're much older, which was one of the draws of coming out to L.A., honestly, because the scene of construction out here is much more open-minded and free. You could come in at a much younger age, and instead of doing that sort of loft remodel work that I would have been probably doing on my own in New York, I was doing homes. And so that's a lot more interesting, I feel like, because then you have exterior walls to play with and windows and fun stuff like that.
Do you have kind of a favorite city that you like architecturally? I mean, LA is really cool, especially the mid-century stuff. But
New York is cool in the States. I think those are the coolest. I want to. I haven't been to Fort Worth, but I want to see the Kimball there. Louis Kahn was another inspiration.
Yeah, sure.
Of mine. That's sort of on my architect's bucket list to go see the museum there.
Salk Institute.
Yeah, so I've been to the Salk Suite. Yeah, it's one of my favorite buildings, certainly on the West Coast.
It's really cool.
It's a really cool place to go visit.
Yeah.
They do cool stuff there too.
Europe at all?
Europe? Yeah, I mean, all the big European cities are amazing. Paris, London. I love Amsterdam. Yeah. Have you been?
I've been to Amsterdam 2002, so it was a long time ago. So I think I was more into the Hodinkee Museum. And like
the party scene in Amsterdam.
And the Van Gogh Museum.
It's a beautiful city, the canals and the small homes.
So what are some of the things you draw inspiration from now, like today? Like when designing a house?
Not architecture. Yeah, that's a good question. Love the work of James Turrell, the sort of the installation artist who does light sculptures.
Okay.
I think that sort of what he does with atmosphere is really incredible, and space. So we sort of look to him.
Cool.
I do, if I'm looking for inspiration, sometimes I do just go to a museum, look at paintings too, just in general. Sure.
What are you looking for?
Just composition, color, space. Rothko's another one that I think is really interesting that you can sort of make associations to that and good architecture in some ways. I was thinking about that the other day. Rothko's are so simple, and like probably all of us, we go, I could do that.
Right.
Yeah, but the minute you try to do that, you realize how difficult and complex it actually is. It's like you can hand anybody a bucket of paint, and they're going to paint a wall. It's just going to be a painted wall, but what takes that paint or those basic materials that he's using and turns it into something that's like truly special and magical?
Yeah.
That's sort of what we try to do in our work too, is like take it from just a wall and windows and doors into something that's really that sort of is elevated beyond just the basics of that.
Yeah, sure.
Sort of the daily challenge.
Well, that sort of makes me think of like the whole, just the idea of when you're trying to design something minimally, it inherently becomes more difficult because any mistake is more obvious and things like that. Like when you're designing a home for somebody, and especially something that's like minimalistic, do you find challenge in that, or like what makes you think, like what draws you to designing more of a minimalistic approach versus say something more ornate?
I think it might just be personality. I think that we sometimes, even in the design process, we look at a lot of options and tend to say, well, can I take this away, or how do I make this simpler? And then you get to a point where you've drawn it back so far that there's that moment when if you take one more thing away, it just doesn't. The whole thing falls apart, and you're like, you found that sweet spot.
Yeah. So addition by subtraction kind of thing.
Yeah, the right balance.
Got it.
I think that I sort of like that simplicity of it. I went to Quaker high school, for example. I think that actually did have an influence on the work in a way, because there's Quaker philosophy is so basic and simple, and so wanting to sort of keep that simplicity to the work, because I think there's a naturalness to simplicity too.
Sure.
Sometimes when you see complicated stuff, you're like, what's it hiding? Why is this so involved and stuff like that? So we do try to pare it back and keep it stripped down and clean, because I also think minimalistic or simple architecture, if it's done well, you can see the idea really easily. There's a simple concept that explains itself really well in minimal work.
This week's episode is brought to you by Passion Fine Jewelry, located in Solana Beach, California, where owners Jana and Tim Jackson welcome you into their living room-like store, carrying a wide range of independent watches and a variety of fine jewelry. Tim is GIA certified, and they also have a goldsmith in-house as part of their staff. Visit passionfinejewelry.com for more information, and if you're ever in Southern California, please make it a point to visit the store. You can also find a wealth of information via Tim's blog, independentintime.com. This episode is also brought to you by Standard H. Standard-H.com is where you will find all of our episodes posted, as well as some branded merchandise for those with Drive. Enter the code PODCAST at checkout to get 20% off your entire purchase. Now back to the conversation. So obviously, like, topography changes things, right? Like, I know you've got the Hilltop House.
Yeah.
By name, the Oak Pass House.
Yeah, the Oak Pass House too.
Which is personally my favorite.
Thank you.
It's a lot of people's favorite.
Yeah.
Obviously, award-winning home. Congrats, by the way.
Thank you.
So, what's the process like? Meaning, how is the approach different? Subtracting topography, like aside from the fact that it's either on the peak or on the side of a hill or in a valley, for example. Like, how does the approach change in designing? Let's just use those two homes, for example.
Well, topography is definitely a restriction. And so it actually helps to have those kinds of restrictions on a project, because it helps guide the decision-making process early.
Sure, yeah.
One of the most difficult projects to start is a flat lot with nothing to sort of push back on. So then you're like, well, we basically have nothing to respond to. So I do like the homes that are topographically complicated, because I think that gives you a lot to push on in the beginning.
Oh, interesting. Cool.
Oak Pass, certainly it was a ridgeline property with hilly on both sides, so that gave us an opportunity to sort of make some exciting moves in terms of the way the geometry of the house played off of the hill. Same for Hilltop. It was all about capturing some very special views in that project, and sort of view through the house, because you had really wonderful views into the valley from that property. So that gave us, gives you a sort of a logic that you can start to build the house upon from that. So we tend to start by looking at topography, and then we place the program into that restriction. So, we work on a programming level early on. So we say, well, how many bedrooms do you want? What kind of other spaces do you want? How big is the house? Do you want it to be 1 story, 2 stories? What are the important things to you? And then that sort of becomes part of the mix as we start, and then we sort of play program and balance up against the lot, and try to create some interesting forms and spaces with that. Yeah.
One of my favorite things, I'm sorry, I'm just like looking over at your shoulder, because I'm like referencing photos that are behind you. What I love about your builds is that there's almost like the indoor-outdoor living, right? Like there's like the vanishing of walls almost in some of the projects. Can you talk about that and like kind of what the impetus is behind those?
Yeah, well, I think that was a great discovery of living in California too. Is just that like probably 90% of the time you can do indoor-outdoor living, because the weather's so great. It's
right,
in the
just
70s.
The ability to do so.
Yeah, and doesn't snow. You don't get too many windstorms and stuff like that. And so, and obviously there's this wonderful tradition of mid-century modern architecture here in Southern California. Is really where it was generated from, and I think a lot of it did have to do with climate, just the fact that you could erase a wall between the interior and the exterior, and it just makes your homes seem so much bigger, and more grand, because you can go right from inside to outside.
Not confined by walls.
Yeah, so we do a lot of big floor-to-ceiling doors and windows, and sometimes they even pocket away completely. I think we have a big house that we're finishing up now in Truesdale, 20,000 square feet, where most of the windows and doors on the main floor just pocket into walls. So then they just disappear completely.
Wow.
And then you just have views for miles. So.
Now, is that one story? Is it
It's a two-story house.
Two-story.
Yeah, with a basement, so it's like technically 3 stories, but it's a big house. And, but again, it was everything about the placement of the house was about the topography and maximizing the views and getting the best distribution of program on the lot.
How does one navigate that relationship with a customer or a client, for example, with what they hope to get and what's physically possible?
They clients often have a lot of hopes, and it's we're still a service industry too, and we want to please our clients
100%
for sure. So in some ways that you kind of guide them, but you also need to listen to them carefully and be very flexible. What we try to do is give our clients the best possible response to their needs. And because the last thing people want is just sort of a overbearing architect that says, no, it's got to be this way or no.
Right.
So
nobody likes the word no.
Yeah. So you have to be flexible and sort of in a way, like the client's needs are sort of like the wind, you just have to go with it and let that sort of guide the process. And then it's our job to give them the best possible solution that works with that. And sometimes, of course, you can go back to a client and say, no, these ideas don't work for the following reasons, but usually we're trying to work with them and trying to realize their dream house, so I think that it's important that we work with them as much as possible to do that.
Sure. I think that's what's great about residential, right?
Yeah.
Because you're actually building a home for somebody.
Yeah. People who have lived in our finished homes are so appreciative of the sort of the elevated lifestyle that comes out of living in a great house.
Yeah.
Just imagine waking up every day to those sorts of views and experiences and how that might change your psychology.
Sure. Well, so what is like an initial meeting like? Like, what are the questions you ask a potential client?
We just go through how they live. We go through the kinds of, obviously the basic stuff is like how, we have a questionnaire too that we hand out, and specifics, even stuff like how much do they cook? What kind of cooking do they do? Gas or electric? How much storage, food storage they need? So there's some fairly detailed stuff that we ask, and then we just try to understand how they live. And then it depends on the client. Some clients are very open-minded, and they're like, get to work, show us what you got. Others might come with a Pinterest board with 200 images on it, and then it's sort of up to us to like translate it, into what they want. And sometimes it can be challenging because if you have 200 Pinterest images, it's a lot to sort through and a lot to try to understand.
God, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Just being inundated by photos like that, especially this day and age.
And we don't use Pinterest too much. I mean, I think everybody uses it a little bit as a tool, but we try to start a project pretty organically and really look at like what the project wants it to be, based upon the constraints that we already talked about, the program and the site and stuff like that. And then, we look at Pinterest more for the detailing sometimes. Hey, this project has a really cool brick or wood, and isn't that interesting how they detailed it or how they hung the brick off of the wall and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more nuanced.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So as an architect, how does one find his own or her own voice in like just design in general without being like, okay, well, this is obviously just a carbon copy from Frank Gehry,
Right.
What is your take on that?
It's a good question. I think it just was really natural for me. I was lucky that nobody really hired me to do a Spanish house or a colonial. So I wasn't in that place where I had to conform to what other people were, like a style that people were trying to tell me to do. So I kind of feel like very lucky that I was able from project number 1 all the way to now keep the stylistic sort of experience pretty consistent, which is great. But it's really just been about trying to stay on brand too. I mean, trying to keep that warm, minimal aesthetic throughout. And the lucky thing is too, having some well-published projects early on meant that like people were finding the brand and coming to say, hey, I really love that project. So, and that was nice because it sort of establishes the theme for the office, and people come seeking it out, which is great.
So what was your first project?
I did this project called the Hollywood Bungalow for a buddy of mine from high school. Actually, it was probably about a 9-month project. He had just purchased a a 2,000, maybe it's 2,000 square foot house up in Hollywood, typical bungalow style, kind of ratty, sort of a bunch of, crappy small rooms and stuff like that. And we just gutted it and basically for 9 months and rebuilt the interior and put, new cabinets and doors and windows in it. But it was great. And it was really fun too, because I was, basically working by myself.
So you were doing the build?
I was doing the build part of it.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I was obviously we work with subcontractors. So if there was concrete and window people and plumbers and electricians, but managing all of that, even doing some of the carpentry work myself, and just being out in the field every day was cool, because there were times that we didn't know what we were doing design wise until we just stood in the room and said, why don't we try this and do that? So we did some pretty cool stuff. We made a great skylight in that project that, we used salvage boards from all the walls that we took out, because the house was, built in the early 20s. So the wood in the house was amazing.
Oh, I bet.
So I said, why don't we save this wood and use it as cladding? So we pulled the wood out, took all the nails out, and then reused it to clad the skylight in the middle of the house that wasn't there. So that kind of stuff was great. And that's the kind of opportunity you get when you are in the field, sort of reacting to stuff you see in the field versus, sitting at a desk, because I probably would have thrown the wood away,
It's like a throwback to the Lego days.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Let's see if this works.
yeah, and do lots of mock-ups and tests and studies like that. So that was cool. And then that project, I had it photographed. I sent it to Dwell magazine. Dwell was like, yeah, let's run with this. So that's amazing. They published that project. That was my first project.
And that was 2010?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was probably a little bit later than that, because if I started, maybe it was 2012, 2013 by the time they published it.
Yeah, sure.
So that was great. And then it was just built off of that. I got another project through a contact, and then a client for Oak Pass hired me. And then that was sort of built off of that. And then when Oak Pass was finished and it sort of got a lot of notoriety, then a lot more people started to come.
Sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what's like a typical day like for you then? Are you doing site visits, or are you mostly in the office? Or
it's a pretty healthy mix these days. I try to dedicate about half the day every day to office stuff. I still try to stay very involved with the design, so most of that time is involved with designing projects. Yeah. And then the other half of the day is administrative things, whether it's having meetings here with clients, going out onto job sites, and go to several job sites a week for project walks, but trying to stay involved with all aspects of the project, but also trying to still stay very involved with the design work too, even though we have a staff of 12. Sure. Sort of give them direction.
It seems like most of the builds have been fairly local to Los Angeles. Venice, I think Manhattan Beach, or
We've done 2 down in Manhattan Beach. One we designed in Hermosa, and then nothing further south than that. I'd love to get down to Orange County and San Diego.
I think I wrote it down. The Chew Shack?
The Chew Shack, yeah. That one's in Manhattan
awesome.
Beach. Yeah, it's a cool house. That was the one that we put Shosugi Ban on. That's a great house.
That's the wood you were talking about, right?
Yeah, the wood.
So I noticed that has reclaimed brick from Shanghai.
Yes, it does.
How does one reclaim brick from Shanghai?
Yeah, so they are, obviously China is expanding and at a rapid rate, and they're tearing down old villages and communities, and so I think that there's a company out there that was just sort of like, oh, here's a brick village, and they take all the brick and sell it, and
that's incredible.
The amazing thing is it's relatively, at the time, it's probably similarly priced now. You can fill a shipping container, and if you bring stuff through China, but maybe $2,000, $2,500, and you can fill a shipping container and get it over here. So the cost of getting stuff from China is not too bad when you factor in the amount of money you save to get it. We've gone to China for stone and stuff like that before too, because it's just worth it.
What kind of brick is it?
It's like a gray and black brick. It's just like it's like a clay brick.
Clay, okay. Yeah. So it is just still clay.
Yeah.
It's not. I don't know. Because of the color, it's almost like a different type of stone, I guess, rather than clay.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I guess by nature, clay, brick has to be clay.
And there's red in it too, but I don't think we used the red.
Got it.
We got rid of the red, so maybe like 5% of the bricks were red.
Yeah. And that's really cool.
Yeah, that was a good moment to do a sort of that feature wall.
Yeah, it's kind of, is it near the stairs?
Yeah,
right?
it's actually right there.
Oh yeah, there's a photo of it right there. Yeah. That's just such a great color, and especially that juxtaposition with the color of the wood.
And that stair gets a lot of, you can tell it's just washed with light from a giant skylight that we have running down the middle of the house.
Sure. Yeah, it's such a cool house. So I've noticed you've been working with Plus Development.
Yep.
Is that your development side of your business?
No,
or
Plus
is that a different, they're a customer?
Yeah,
Okay.
Plus is a customer. Great group of guys. They're probably doing some of the coolest, most exciting, like speculative work in LA right now.
Sure. How'd you get paired up with those guys?
Through Oak Pass again. Like they saw it, and they liked what they saw, and they reached out to me and said, "Can you design some homes for us?" So we've done. We have one that's finishing up. Our first one that I did after Oak Pass is basically going to be finished this month and hit the market.
What's that one called?
It's the Carla Ridge house.
Okay.
Which is being furnished as we speak, so that'll be exciting. See if somebody buys it. And,
now, is it being sold as furnished, or is it just being staged?
Sold furnished. Yeah, I think for these bigger, higher-end homes, the tendency is not to stage them because everybody recognizes staged furniture. The tendency is to just purchase it, and so you get a higher quality.
And the design is synonymous.
Yeah, so I'm excited about it.
Same kind of point of view.
And that's a big house, 20,000 square feet. So
that's insane.
They put a lot of trust in a guy that had only, at the time, done 3 homes to do a 20,000 square foot house. But it's cool. Yeah, I'm excited.
20,000 square feet in Los Angeles.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. I mean, it's kind of amazing. And then so we've done that one. We got another one under construction with them, and a couple other projects. So they've been a really great resource and client to us. Great, like I said, a great bunch of guys too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just on the topic of design, just in general, what do you consider to be good design? What constitutes good design?
Oh, that's a great question because that's so you can go so deep with that, right? I think good design is it looks incredibly practical. It looks. Sometimes the best design looks like it was always meant to be that way. It looks like it's existed in that form for centuries, and that there's no other way for it to be. Like it's just that naturally perfect. But I think, certainly there's this amount of elegance too that goes into good design. I mean, it's hard too, especially like you think about the way social media has affected design too a little bit. It's like you get daily images about like what good design is supposedly, but it's also
good versus popular can be very
like,
different things.
It's sort of morphed in what we think of as good design. Just because it's a popular on social media doesn't make it necessarily good design. It just happens to be what's trendy this month, and so it's sort of interesting to see, like maybe you take a step back and see what you thought was good design 5 years ago and see if it still looks good, and then it's sort of at what point does it become timeless? If it's you look at it 10 years later, you're like, well, is that still good or not? It's still good. Then after 10 years, it's probably a good design.
Well, sure. I mean, that sort of raises the question too, just in and of itself within the architectural world. Like obviously there's been trends throughout the years, and obviously based on geography too, like growing up in North Carolina, most late 70s, early 80s homes were split level homes. Yeah. You had mid-century modern homes in the 50s and 60s that were usually single level. You had carports and things like that. Whereas now you want garages. Again, there's like weather, all sorts of things that contribute to the design. But what's kind of your take on trends in the architectural world? Like, it just seems like historically they lasted like a decade, right? This is like a 60s home. This is a 70s home.
Or even shorter now. I feel like maybe trends are rolling over faster. I notice it. I do check out stuff like Instagram to see what's trending, because it's like, wait, I don't want to do that. Like the past 18 months have been all about arches. Everybody loves to look at arches now. I don't know if that trend is going to stay much longer because it's
Gothic architecture.
Or even just very basic arches. Yeah, not too Gothic, but there's sort of a modernist arch thing happening. A couple of years ago, it was like, you probably noticed, but every single new bar restaurant had to have reclaimed wood in it. Like it was like a thing. And then now you don't see it anymore because it was like the trend just got played out. But it seems like trends are just rolling over much faster now. You get like a 2-year window on a trend and then it's like it's been burned out because maybe just because it gets so exposed on the internet.
I feel like those trends, like in the bar scene for sure, in restaurants and such, initially I think it was just kind of like the architects and the builders just pulling the wool over your eyes based on like, well, this is actually cheaper to build. So I'm just going to expose the rafters and all the pipes because I don't have to pay to cover them. Right.
Make it, and it looks industrial too. It looks
right.
Yeah.
So and then all of a sudden it's a trend and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So how was that Kanye concert?
Oh, you saw that on my screen. That was pretty cool. I wouldn't say I was a fan of Kanye, and I'm probably not a fan of Kanye to this day, but I was really impressed by the production of that concert that he did. What was that? The Life of Pablo tour, where he was just flying around on the hovering stage over the audience, and there was like a mosh pit below him, and the lighting was just sweet. Did you see it? Did you see that?
No, I didn't attend, but it was all over social media, obviously. And
the way it was produced was just really theatrical and very cool.
There's a magician, I think it was Dan White, that helped him with.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
He's the guy at the Nomad Hotel in New York City.
Oh, interesting.
I think
I'll
he
have to
helped.
look him up.
I could be wrong. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure he was the guy that was contributing towards that tour.
Okay, I'll have to look that up.
Maybe that's why it was magical, pun intended. But so what does music play a role in your design process at all?
You know, I it's an interesting thing to try to link music to architecture. It does. I mean,
heavily involved in fashion, obviously, but like
I mean, obviously, I listen to music all the time, and I probably listen to, you know, some of my favorite music to listen to when I'm making architecture is techno, because it just keeps going, you know, and then you can work
kind of meditative
for 6 hours. I also make techno too. It's a very similar process where you're trying to like get to the essence of a sound and strip it back as far as you can until it doesn't work anymore. It falls apart. Same thing as what we try to do with architecture, but it's a completely different medium.
Wow,
to work
that's
in.
Cool.
But
that's very cool. Without using a child reference, do you have a favorite house that you've worked on? Meaning like they're each your children is what I mean by that.
Well, I think I just pointed out that the house I would most want to live in out of all the ones I built was that guest house at Oak Pass, which was probably the third one that we did, and just the size of it. I'm not the kind of person that needs a 10,000 or 20,000 square foot house to live in. In fact, I would probably feel like you don't know what's going on in the other half of your house. Like,
I just don't want to pay that light bill.
Yeah,
you know, or the heating.
So that house was 2 bedrooms. I think total size was about 2,000 square feet, maybe 2,500 square feet, and it was just I could live in that. And that seemed
kind of
really
a sweet
great.
spot.
Yeah, and it was up in sort of the way it was built, structured. It was up in the trees. The ceilings weren't all that high. They were maybe like 9 feet tall, so it wasn't there's nothing sort of grandiose about it. But it was just really the way the light is in that space, and the materiality of the house is just really great.
What's been kind of the hardest part about owning your business, but it being from the get-go or even up until now? Like, what's tough for you, or what's been the hardest part?
Probably the stuff that they don't teach you in architecture school. You know, the day-to-day management of a business, sort of, you know, payroll and taxes and insurance and you know, even people management. You know, if you're working by yourself, it's one thing and you can grind, but when you have 12 people that you need to inspire and lead, it's a completely different ball of wax. So you have to pay attention to that and make sure everybody that is working with you is happy and engaged in the work and feels rewarded. Yeah. So that's a completely different animal. They don't teach that, at least not in architecture school. Maybe they teach it in business school. So there's catching up to that. They just sort of the aspects of running a business, and obviously a construction company is probably even more challenging in terms of, you know, working with subcontractors, making sure that they're getting paid on time or not like, you know, taking advantage of you and getting the details built right can be a lot of work just on its own too.
What's been easy for you? What are some of the easier things?
Just doing the work is the easiest part because I love to do it. I just feel like I'm in a natural place to do the work. So when I do get a little bit of time, an hour or two here to just say, hey, I'm going to design for a couple hours. It's a great spot. And then it's obviously so rewarding because you work on these houses and these projects for years to finally see them get finished. Because it's like, wow, you know, it took a while, but it's the best feeling to see it finish and be like, yeah,
that
it
sense
worked.
of accomplishment.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I guess we kind of glazed over it. What was sort of the timing like? Like, how did you know you were ready to go out on your own? Like, what made you decide to do your own thing?
The recession happened in 2008. Yeah. So I think that sort of pushed me out the door a little bit because I always knew I wanted to work, and I got to the point where I was a little bit stubborn and didn't like working for anybody anymore. I was like, I knew I had chops, you know, and was ready to go out and use them. I was like, well, this is a recession. Now is as good a time as any. And my buddy had just bought a house, and it was just like, it's like, why don't I do it? Just one project and build off of that. And I didn't really have a lot of expectations beyond that, but it worked out. So I felt felt like, that's one of the nice things about, like, economic booms are great, but recessions can be great for people too, because it gives you an opportunity to sort of try, you move in a different direction or try things that you wouldn't be able to try if you were working through a boom.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that could be a little ingredient in the secret sauce,
Yeah.
That's,
you get to sharpen your sword a little bit during periods when you're not as busy.
Well, and just your comment on expectations too,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people come out like swinging for, trying to hit a home run in their first at bat.
Right.
Granted, you got published in Dwell
in
your first project, so maybe a little biased towards that side. But what is some of the advice that you would give any, say, architecture students these days that are, do you think it's smart for them to work for other people first? Like, what are some of the pieces of advice?
I think you should work. They almost have to because of the internship requirements in architecture. But I'd say work in a few different offices just so you can get exposed to different sizes and project types. But also get out in the field, get involved in making stuff. It's surprising how many architects don't really understand how the world is put together. It's sort of, it seems like absolutely critical to me to understand how pieces are put together of homes and buildings on a technical level. Because I think once you have that good technical understanding, it's going to make your design work a lot better too. You'll be a lot more responsible about what you design. If you realize the burden of construction and assembly, put places on it.
As far as like you and your personal life, like how do you like to spend your free time? Do you have hobbies? Like what are you into when you're not working?
I'm either making music or going skiing in the winter. In the summer, I might go for hikes and stuff like that. Yeah.
Do you travel for hikes or
Excuse me.
That's good. Mostly local stuff?
Mostly local. Yeah.
Like to Mescal, where do you like to go?
I like to go up into the mountains, like Angeles Forest or
Idlewild. Yeah, sort of local.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Pretty local, hour drive or so. Or go out to the desert. The desert's beautiful. Palm Springs and Joshua Tree is just a great place to go. I like to go out there.
Absolutely.
Or up into the mountains. Even mountains of the Eastern Sierras, even in the summer, are just gorgeous. So if I can get out there for a weekend.
I've actually never been to Tahoe in the winter. I've only been in the summer.
Oh, really?
It's amazing.
It's gorgeous. Yeah,
it's so beautiful up there.
Great in all seasons.
Yeah. Cars? You into cars?
I wish I were more into cars. I have a Land Cruiser 100, which I've coveted for a long time, and it's just cleared the 300,000 mark.
No way.
Yeah, and it's doing great. I mean, it's old. It's 2003, but there's just something about those vehicles that
last forever. Yeah,
they last forever. You can take them anywhere. They'll go anywhere. And I've taken it off-road places that I was like, how did I just get through that? Because I can't go or turn around now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
No 3-point turn.
yeah, but Land Cruisers are great. There's they're can do anything trucks, but they also are really comfortable too. So it's a nice thing to drive around. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Land Cruisers.
What's your favorite ski area?
These days, Mammoth. I'm a Mammoth guy. Yeah,
season pass guy?
Yeah, I have a season pass. So that was the Icon Pass, right? That's sort of. And this year I went to Whistler for the first time, which I loved. Whistler's sweet.
Oh, it's epic up there.
Yeah.
Did you stick more to Whistler or Blackcomb?
A little bit. I think it was Blackcomb. Yeah.
Historically, people used to say Blackcomb's more of a snowboarder's mountain and Whistler's more of a skier's mountain.
Oh, interesting.
I snowboard. I liked them both. I don't know how one... Or maybe all the snowboard parks are on Blackcomb.
That might make sense. The coolest thing I did was the Blackcomb Glacier.
Okay.
So I went up there and skied down. I realized that I was going to encounter a snow cave, which is a cool thing to do. Sort of, what's this? A big cave, and you unbuckle and you climb into it, and it's like it's a really cool world in there. And there were just tons of people in there too. I was like, wow, never skied anywhere where there was a snow cave to
I missed
explore.
Out on that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And you can ride that big lift that goes between the two mountains. It's just a scary ride. You're like as high as an airplane between the two mountains. So that was pretty neat.
Back to the business just for a hot second. Like how far in advance do you normally get your projects? Like if somebody calls you up today, and says, hey, I want to do a house with you. Is there, what kind of lead time are they looking at?
Probably a couple months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's not too long. I mean, I think people that are looking for houses, they need to go right away, you know. And so if I was to get somebody to hire me today and, hey, we need a house, I'd say, give me 2 months, and then we'd make sure it was staffed appropriately, that we get going, because people buy a lot or buy a property, they don't want to carry it, you know. There's obviously a huge interest in getting the work developed and moving into it. So it's very hard to, you know, I've heard about some of the great architects like Glenn Mercutt. I once heard a lecture from him where he was like, he works basically one project at a time at the time and didn't have any help. So if you want to work with him, you have to wait, you know, and you could be waiting years to get a house from him. But in the interest of just putting work in the world, you know, the approach is to just, if work comes, we'll and it's the right project for us, we'll do it. Yeah. Even if it means growing the office to do it.
Sure. Yeah, I guess that was going to be my follow-up question is like renovations versus just ground up. Yeah,
obviously the preference is to do ground up. Yeah, but we do a couple renovations here and there, but for the most part it's ground up, which is cool. This is another cool thing about LA too. So there's still a market for ground up construction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool, man. Well, this has been fun.
This is great.
Really great to meet you finally. Following you on Instagram all these years.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
I really appreciate you having me here in the office.
Of course. That was a pleasure.
Okay. Well, until next time.
Thank you.
See ya. Okay. Big thanks goes out to Noah once again for having me within the workshop. He and his team are really working on some remarkable things, so I can't stress enough to check him out online. Also wanted to take the time to thank you guys for listening. The encouragement and support that I've been receiving for these podcasts has been truly overwhelming, and I can't thank you enough. Please visit standard-h.com to support in other ways, such as merchandise purchases. Use the code podcast once again for 20% off your entire purchase. And music provided by Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful. And we'll catch you next week. Thanks.